So Sam is the Acting Director, Information Assurance and Cyber Security from the Government Communications Security Bureau. I think his business cards are about this long. Look, we've now had an insight into what the economic impacts potentially are annually on the New Zealand economy. I'm sure that Sam is going to provide us a bit more insight about what that means in real terms and perhaps what we can do to minimise some of the risks that are out there. I asked Sam if he had a secret talent or a hobby that he'd like to share with. I think he's actually a cyber crime fighter, but actually he shared with me that when he's not fighting cyber crime, you will probably not be able to find him because he'll be out somewhere in the rural back blocks of New Zealand photographing the night sky. So Sam, welcome to Govis.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Rebecca. Indeed, I do enjoy nighttime astrophotography. I highly recommend it as a great way to see our beautiful country. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. It's a really exciting time, and I'm really thrilled to see the diversity of topics that have been covered at this conference and the call for a new mindset and agility in dealing with the opportunities of digital transformation for government. I'll talk about this theme a bit more, as others have, but first I want to take a few minutes to explain our contribution to New Zealand from the Government Communications Security Bureau, GCSB. It's not normally the sort of things that come to mind when you think of the GCSB, I do confess, so it would be remiss of me not to tell you a little bit about our cybersecurity and information assurance functions. IACD, my Directorate, Information Assurance and Cybersecurity, it is a long business card. We're part of the GCSB. Our mission is to protect and enhance New Zealand's security and well-being. One of the ways that we do this in our Directorate is to protect our information and our systems. Our mandate, described in the Intelligence and Security Act of 2017, is to do anything necessary or desirable to protect information infrastructures of importance to the Government of New Zealand. We deliver information assurance and cybersecurity services to government and nationally significant organisations to help protect them against high-impact harms. Those organisations include financial institutions, core government, niche intellectual property generators, key economic generators, and those responsible for running the infrastructure that powers our country. We have a unique blend of legislative powers and responsibilities, technical capabilities, and highly trained staff. And we use advanced technology to protect computer networks against online attacks. And when those serious incidents do occur, we're a point of contact for advice and support on mitigation and prevention. Our information assurance function, my nominal day job, is keeping our sensitive information secure. And we have a number of aspects and capabilities to this. It's an essential part of ensuring citizens have trust in the government and our ability to keep their information secure. Part of our role includes the provision of high-grade encryption services, things that you wouldn't get from commercial providers. We ensure classified facilities are free from information security vulnerabilities and interception devices. We help agencies manage the risk to New Zealand's information through provision of security policy and guidance, most notably the NZISM, the Information Security Manual. Should expect to hear more about that in the next coming weeks. We're launching a new version of the NZISM on a website rather than a 600-page book. A lot of people are very happy. Our security responsibilities also carry over onto the networks that carry our most sensitive information. Through the Telecommunications Interception Capability and Security Act, TICSA, a bit shorter, we regulate telecommunications operators in New Zealand. We help bolster their security posture by engaging with them on their plans and what they might be looking to do and help guide them to avoid any national security risks. We also have responsibilities under the Outer Space and High Altitude Activities Act, OSHA, to consider any national security risks that may arise through rocket launches, and you'll be aware of New Zealand's nascent space industry and a new launch into space. This is an area of activity that will increase as we move from testing to commercial payloads. Our National Cyber Security Centre, the NCSC, has a role working across government and the private sector to implement our cyber defence capabilities that we developed through Project Cortex. These capabilities protect organisations from advanced, persistent cyber threats. These are the type of threats that are typically unknown to commercial providers, and we're able to do this in part through our international relationships. Part of this work, last month our Minister Little, announced an expansion we're calling malware-free networks, where we will engage with telecommunications providers to help secure our customers from those, a broad range of threats for a broad range of organisations. Another part of our role delivered through the NCSC is to assemble threat information and make that available through our defensive capabilities and to other partners as well. And again, we gather this information not only from our own capabilities and what we see in New Zealand, but also from our international partnerships. We make this available to New Zealand's nationally significant organisations so they themselves can defend their own networks from those advanced threats. That information ranges from an indicator of compromise, a particularly technical piece of information that you can use to defend yourself, to more general alerts and advisories so our customers have situational awareness about what's going on. We also work with boards and executive teams to help raise their awareness of cybersecurity and why it's such an important matter for their organisations so they can lift the resilience of their own organisations too. So why does this matter? There's two parts to this coin. There's risk and there's opportunity. On the opportunity side, thinking about the theme of this conference, digital transformation and the opportunities for government through new digital technologies. For us to make the most of that opportunity, we need our citizens to trust that government will be a good steward of their information and keep their information secure. We also need government itself to have the confidence that information is secure. We'll need information to inform policy and decision making, which in turn will then support improved economic and social well-being. I'm sure this has been reflected in the previous presentations and will be going forward. For people to engage in the system, they need to know that security is embedded from day one. If we want to achieve the level of digital transformation envisaged by government, designing security and privacy into the system at the earliest possible state is a critical enabler to success. It's no good when you're about to go live to say, oh, did we think about security? Did we think about privacy? It's too late. It's hard to remediate then. Security and privacy go hand in hand. One of the most important and significant consequences of a security breach can be a loss of private information. Data sets are traded on the dark web, and a set of patient medical records can fetch hundreds of dollars by those nefarious cyber criminals. The number of data breaches over the last few years is quite extensive. There are numerous cases where millions of records have been stolen, and we don't know yet the impact of some of those breaches. So I want to spend the next couple of minutes giving you a snapshot of the threat landscape as seen from the National Cybersecurity Centre. Last financial year, we recorded nearly 400 incidents, 396 incidents, which was an increase of 58 over the previous year. Typically, we see about 15 to 20 serious incidents every month. Due to our focus on those nationally significant organisations, this reflects only a small proportion of the total potential harm that could be occurring against New Zealand. Those incidents included those that were reported by an affected party directly to the NCSC, as well as incidents we detected through our Cortex capabilities. Of those 396 incidents, nearly a third of them had indicators of compromise that indicated a link to state-sponsored groups. This included threats that directly targeted New Zealand organisations, as well as campaigns that caught us up. So they may not have been targeting New Zealand directly, but they were just casting the net widely, taking a shotgun approach, and they happened to compromise New Zealand organisations. The motivations for those attacks range the spectrum from espionage through to political influence and using New Zealand as a staging post. That number may look familiar. So while the landscape continues to evolve and grow, so does our ability to understand the threat and to do something about it. Our defensive capabilities help to reduce the harm caused by those advanced foreign-sourced threats. As part of Cortex, the NCSC sought external advice on a model for how we can measure the harm that we have avoided through detecting and responding to these advanced incidents. In the last financial year, we calculated nearly $40 million of harm was avoided by the organisations that received our capability. I note that we hadn't finished rolling out our capability at that stage. In the last financial year as well, looking at the potential harm that could have existed to all of those customers, that's our $640 million number. There's a wide range of attacks that have a real impact on organisations, even just simply the cost to remediate, to respond and to understand what's happening. So the targets of those actors, they range all the way from government industry, government agencies, to generators of niche intellectual property, all the way from our largest corporations down to home users who are using internet banking. The victims of those operations vary in the degree and immediacy of the harm experienced. In the most serious cases, victims' confidential information was stolen. We've observed it being exfiltrated from their network. And the long-term consequences of that loss is still unknown. Other cases may involve home users who can no longer access their photos and memories because their computer has been locked up by some sort of ransomware attempt. We also see that occurring with small to medium enterprises as well. I want to pause briefly and give you two particular case studies that both involve what we call a RAT, a remote access Trojan. So a piece of software that gets installed on your computer that you may not notice anything happening, but it gives the adversary an ability to connect into your computer and control it remotely. The NCSC learned of a New Zealand organisation's network that had been used to perform a significant cyber attack on an external foreign party. NCSC and the police investigated and located the RAT malware on a server on the network. The functionality allowed the adversary to route the attack from parts unknown through New Zealand and then out again to affect someone else. They typically do this to obfuscate and hide their intent and their capability and where the attack's really coming from. It was likely opportunistic. They probably just used a weak password to get into the network, scanned it online, found some convenient way in, installed their RAT and started launching attacks. It wasn't specifically targeted at that organisation at New Zealand. We worked with the organisation to remediate, to find this RAT, to remove it from the network and help give them guidance on how they can avoid this happening again. The next example, again with a RAT, we learned of malware activity with a New Zealand subsidiary of a global organisation. We worked with them to investigate and found 2 different instances of RAT malware on their servers. This time it wasn't to launch attacks elsewhere, it was specifically to target this organisation. So the adversary had used a password dumping utility to try and find more passwords and had left evidence of lateral movement. So infiltrating originally and then moving along the network to try and embed and disguise what their activity was. The presence of these tools indicated that the scope of the compromise was likely wider than just that single server, and we attributed the compromise in this case to a foreign intelligence service. In response, the organisation launched a global investigation and significantly improved its network posture. So the cyber trends that we're seeing year on year at the moment, the increased likelihood of New Zealand being caught up in some sort of campaign due to the increasing instability. The things that are going on out there, the reckless actions by some actors, happen to be cast very wide, and New Zealand sometimes is caught up in that completely unintentionally. No one in this case is specifically targeting us, we just happen to be caught up in it. Those major incidents that we're seeing, it's symptomatic of a larger insecurity that's growing in cyberspace. Many of those incidents, even though they weren't targeted at New Zealand, they're opportunistic and there can be quite significant consequences for New Zealand. They weren't attacking us directly, but once they are into our network, they're absolutely rummaging around and trying to find what leverage they can gain. Cyber operations are moving beyond just espionage, where we're finding some adversaries engage in revenue generation, I'll talk about that shortly, and perhaps moving to influence operations and doing cyber operations for political purposes. The volume of threats is increasing very rapidly, and the technical significance and capability of the malware that we see out there is also growing. We're finding now that malware is very modular. You can plug in an exploit chain over here and a RAT over here, and very unsophisticated actors have access to very sophisticated technology. The line between advanced persistent threat actors and criminal groups seems to be blurring. Ransomware kits can be purchased as a service. You can buy ransomware on the dark web and even contact a help desk to get guidance on how to use your ransomware. For those who don't know, ransomware is where a piece of malware encrypts the contents of your computer and demands you pay money before you get the encryption key to get everything back. If you don't have adequate backups, or if the ransomware also encrypts your backups, you may be in a very problematic situation. We're seeing some industry analysis that suggests over 200,000 new pieces of malware are discovered every single day. Some of this is very simply just changing things slightly to try and avoid detection, but there are undoubtedly a growing number of actors in this space that we're trying to defend against. The average time it takes for an organisation to detect an intrusion is 172 days, which is a terrifying thought that someone is inside your network, rummaging around your computers, trying to find leverage, trying to attack other people, and it takes months and months before you discover it. The good news is that number's coming down. Only a few years ago, it was over 200 days. So it's going in the right direction. It still needs to move a huge amount further. It's one of the key messages is being ready and detecting these things as early as you can. Most threats, around 53% of threats, were detected and notified to victims by an external party. So it's not that organisations themselves are discovering these things, it's that someone else discovers, hey, you're attacking me, could you stop that? And that's how they learn about the fact that they have been compromised. So some of the vectors and the types of threat we see, phishing. This is receiving an email purporting to be from someone you know or having some attachment that it's enticing you to open, and that attachment has malicious content. It might be a PDF, and it might even be specifically tailored for your organisation. It might be relevant to what you do personally even. And inside that PDF or inside that document is a piece of malware that infects your computer. The malware itself, software that's malicious. It's designed to harm you, provide backdoors, encrypt your contents, or give the adversary a means to exfiltrate the data that they're seeking. Denial of service, it's linked to ransomware. Denial of service is where perhaps someone will overload your website. They're not emailing you any malicious content, they're just sending from across the internet thousands and thousands of requests to your website to overload it and take it offline. Perhaps because they find it entertaining, perhaps because they are a competitor who wants to take you offline. Perhaps they're trying to distract you from some other operation that's going on, tie up your incident responders with a denial of service attack while we're over here doing something else on your network. And I spoke earlier about remote access Trojans, designed to, often delivered via phishing and designed to give the adversary remote access to your systems. So that may all seem very abstract without actual examples, so I'll spend a few minutes giving you some case studies. Some of these you will have heard of, one of them is lesser known. NotPetya was a ransomware attack that masqueraded as a ransomware attack, but in fact it was targeted at disrupting and doing denial of service against Ukrainian government financial energy sectors. It was indiscriminate and reckless. While it was targeted at the Ukraine, it had no means to stop it spreading. And unfortunately, in our globally connected world, once this attack was launched, it started spreading worldwide and had a worldwide impact. There were no confirmed reports of NotPetya having a direct impact on New Zealand, but there were some indirect impacts. There are some global shipping lines that had to close down operations and revert to paper-based operations while they upgraded their systems quickly. We had some organisations panicking and taking their systems offline to make sure they were upgraded and resilient against this attack in case it did hit them. It reinforces that New Zealand is not immune from this type of threat. In a globally connected world, our geographic isolation no longer affords us the protection we once enjoyed. As part of the international community, with our like-minded partners, we've endorsed their attribution of the NotPetya attack to Russia. Another high-profile attack was the WannaCry international ransomware campaign. This was specifically ransomware. It was specifically targeted at anyone and to encrypt their devices and to gather money to try and raise revenue. Fortunately, the timing of this attack occurred over a weekend for New Zealand time, and so that worked to our advantage. Organisations could get out in front, patch things over the weekend before people started arriving and opening their email and unleashing this attack on their organisations. Our NCSC and CERT in New Zealand collaborated quickly to get advice out to our customers and the public so that the potential could be reduced, and people could patch their systems, keep things up to date. The harm was further reduced when a UK researcher discovered an accidental kill switch that was embedded in the malware and did the right thing by registering a domain name which immediately neutered the malware, and it no longer spread. The campaign, while it was designed to raise revenue, wasn't particularly successful in that regard. Open source reporting indicates that maybe $200,000 US of revenue was actually generated. Again, our international partners have attributed this attack to North Korea. The next campaign has the term Cloud Hopper that was made public by PwC and BAE Systems in 2017. We were made aware of this attack slightly earlier. It was a global intrusion that was targeting managed IT service providers. Our response was in collaboration again with our international security partners. The actor behind this campaign had the cover term of APT-10, Advanced Persistent Threat 10, which was an espionage campaign, again, targeted at those managed IT service providers, those organisations that you yourselves may outsource your ICT administration to, as many people do these days, and give them the keys to your network, hoping that they themselves are secure. Global managed service providers were compromised as part of this campaign, which then allowed the attacker to reach through them into those customers, be they government or private, to access their information as a trusted organisation. Again, we worked with CERT New Zealand and through our security information exchanges to provide advice on threat prevention and mitigation to both key government and private sector organisations. We released advice on our website, both CERT and NCSC. This campaign demonstrates the risk of supply chain. How do you know that the organisation you are giving the keys to and trusting to run your infrastructure are secure themselves? You need to make sure that your contracts are back-to-back with them and you put obligations on them to keep themselves secure. Another campaign I wanted to speak about is an issue that has hit the media. In July 2017, 3 of our international partners reported a campaign from an APT group which targeted the energy sector. Historically, actors have indeed targeted the energy sector with various results, sometimes just ranging from espionage all the way up to the ability to disrupt energy systems in the event of a hostile conflict. This campaign was long running and had 2 different types of victims. It was very sophisticated in that the first set of victims were the staging victims. Instead of going after these energy companies directly, they found trusted partners, people who provided service to these energy companies. Maybe it's a HVAC company or a lawyer who provides service to an energy company. The adversary at first compromised a wide number of staging targets as pivot points to then get into this network. But they didn't do this immediately. They were much more tactical about their approach. They waited for a year. So they compromised all these targets, embedded themselves, made sure they weren't discovered, moved around the network, put more remote access Trojans back in place, and then waited. Eventually, they started using these targets to phish the intended target, sending these emails with malicious attachments. So after they're well secured, well embedded in the target network, they then move on to the next target with these phishing emails. And I will trust if I receive an email from my lawyer or outsourced managed company that this makes sense, I'll open this email. Turns out, no, that wasn't right. Upon gaining access to the target, the energy sector, these adversaries specifically then went after industrial control systems, the pieces of software and the technology that directly control the power grid systems. So it wasn't just, let's try and compromise for ransomware and get some money. It wasn't to steal their secrets. It was specifically to look at, can we control these systems remotely? As by way of some timeline, March 2016 is when those first staging targets were compromised, all the way through to February of 2017 before the first phishing email was sent to then try and successfully compromise those energy sector organisations. In May, the intended targets networks were directly accessed through those intermediary targets, and eventually later in May, cybersecurity authorities such as the NCSC and CERT became aware and released these advisories. In response, we worked with our partners and we released advisories. We put out advisory to our customers to advise them on what was going on, and we did observe through our Cortex capabilities a number of scanning attempts for the same vulnerabilities that were used. So people rattling the door handle, trying to see if companies in New Zealand had the same vulnerabilities exposed and they could use them to launch attacks again. We're not aware of any compromise of New Zealand victims, and we've worked with those organisations that were scanned directly. Just a short note, you might be able to read that TLP Amber at the top. That's a traffic light protocol. That's a marking system where we say how you can promulgate this information yourself. We might release TLP White, which is this is public information, all the way up to TLP Red, which is this is information just for you, please do not share it more widely. Amber means you can share it in your organisation with people that need to know. So before I come to what you can do to help build resilience against these sort of attacks, let's talk about what New Zealand government is doing in response to this. So I've already spoken about the NCSC and GCSB and our role in protecting the country, but there are many multifaceted aspects and interventions government is driving at. The National Cyber Policy Office in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet is responsible for the overall system, governing what goes on and driving the strategy. And in fact, they are currently leading on a refresh of the New Zealand cyber security strategy. And next week, they will be doing engagements in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch with the public and industry to understand what New Zealand needs from cybersecurity. So if you're interested, and I've motivated you to think about this, please do go along to those events. CERT New Zealand provides advice for the public and for New Zealand at large. They triage cybersecurity incidents. There's no wrong door, so contact the CERT in the first instance if you need, or the NCSC. They also engage with similar international CERT organisations. New Zealand Police investigates cases of cybercrime and cyber-enabled crime. So cybercrime might be an unlawful access of a computer and done something damaging with an industrial control system. Cyber-enabled crime perhaps could be bullying that's being done via cyber, or other nefarious things, blackmail that happens to be done via email. Department of Internal Affairs, or the Government Chief Digital Officer, is guiding and supporting all of government digital transformation, as well as the anti-spam unit inside DIA, which also helps to protect against unsolicited commercial email messages and other forms of spam. The PSR, Protective Security Requirements Team, inside the intelligence community, works with security practitioners from across government to develop and promote the security standards for physical, personnel and information security. This includes the New Zealand Information Security Manual, the NZISM, which gives technical security guidance and controls for government IT systems. And again, our website's just been launched with a new digital version rather than a book. So what should you do? What should your organisations do? First thing is we need to take a risk management approach. A whole of business risk management approach. So tailor your approach to match your organisation and the information and assets that you hold. If you are protecting personal information about vulnerable members of society, perhaps that's quite important to keep secure. If you're running a system that has national security information, that's quite important to secure. If you happen to be running something that has specifically a commercial impact just for you, you need to make the judgments on what would the commercial impact be if I lost this information? What would the impact be if someone modified this information without me authorising it? You need to be asking your IT and your security teams the right questions. Not are we secure, but how do we know we are secure? This involves risk management and reporting, resilient technology platforms, and careful system monitoring. You should have IT security as a topic of your governance. It needs to be closely aligned to the business objectives. You need to have metrics in place that help track the effectiveness of your IT security spend. How much was a loss of service as a result of unidentified IT security risks in a given period? The key thing I think you should do is be prepared. I often say it's not a matter of if we'll have a compromise or if we'll be the subject of some sort of incident, it's a matter of when. So you need to follow some sort of framework. You can pick and choose. If you're a government organisation, the PSR and the ISM are mandatory. The NCSC has voluntary standards for industrial control systems, but there's a lot of information out there. There's the New Zealand CERT has a list of critical controls. Our partners in Australia have the ASD Essential 8 controls. And the SANS Institute have published some as well. as long as you're doing something, you cannot sit back and just presume it won't happen, we're isolated, it's okay. Be prepared. You should think about testing your plans. How do you know they work? You exercise. You run tabletop exercises. Maybe you get some penetration testers in. You can hire external companies who will come and try and test your systems and then give you a report and explain where they think the vulnerabilities are. Define the roles and responsibilities in your organisation, and again, make sure that you classify your events, you look at what's happening from your systems, what's being reported back, and you categorise them, and you try and develop a holistic understanding of what's happening on your networks. There's a lot of detail in terms of knowing what's on your system, running inventories. It's very challenging in our new modern environments of bring your own device, but you need systems that can understand and report on that. If someone introduces a new device onto your network tomorrow, do you know about it? Do you care? What is it doing? Do you understand what it's doing on your network, both internally and externally? What if someone's using the Wi-Fi from outside your office to launch attacks on some other party? What implications does that have for you? And I think you should report to management on the state of your network. I think you should explain, here are the risks that we see, here are the gaps that we have. It's a difficult thing to confront, but some honesty around, we don't know, this is where we don't know, this is where we do. Try and fill in those gaps. Having a plan, for me, is the most important part of being prepared. So that's a finish for my presentation. I hope that I haven't scared you too much. Happy to take some questions if anyone has any. So tell them about the case studies I just explained. Sometimes you have to motivate people through an example that other people have provided for us. It's really expensive to bolt on security afterwards. And so explaining that, sure, we can proceed with this particular initiative, this particular project, and we'll get to that late stage and we'll have to do some security controls. We'll have to think about how we lock things down. If we do that early on, it'll be easier and cheaper to deliver that result. If we try and bolt it on later, you'll have to undo things, re-engage with vendors, perhaps change your products, re-engineer, re-architect. You'll be doing rework, and no one wants to do that. So explain to the business, if we do this up front, not only will we be more secure and more resilient, we will save money in the long run.
So next question, does being a member of the Five Eyes Alliance make us a target of state-sponsored attacks?
I don't know, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. What do you think?
So will New Zealand be creating a space force to counter American plans for dominance of space as recently announced?
If they do, I will apply for the Space Force.
MB has been advertising for space policy advisors. Even now?
Yep.
Yeah, and there's actually one person in the audience wants to know if you can recommend ransomware as a service.
I-
I'm asking for someone else.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Look, thanks, Sam. I think that's been incredibly enlightening. And hopefully it hasn't frightened too many people.
All right.
A small gift to thank you for your
Excellent.
time.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And can we just...
Thank you.